If I'm going to blast 1,000 emails out and I get 5 responses, that sounds awful to me. I view sales as more of a game of outthinking your competition than outworking your competition. And I hate this notion that like sales is all about like hustle bro and, hustle culture. Hard work is just a table stake. Like, I don't think it sets you apart from anybody else. If you make more dials and you send more emails, like cool for you, bro. But like, you're not getting paid on that. You get paid when you have better outcomes.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we have an incredible interview ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Sometimes we open up for Q&A. Other days, you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. Now, as a reminder, if you love the content that we share here on the show, make sure you subscribe for more. All right, today we have the second of 5 interviews with the best BizDev practitioners in the game as part of our August series on all things business development. I'm particularly excited about this one because today's guest is going to cover some of the biggest things that hold most recruiters back from driving new business. Yeah, selling the problem, not the solution, crafting your messaging so that you differentiate and stand out, doing what's right versus doing what scales, how to conduct a win-loss analysis for yourself, and so much more. But more importantly, it's shining a light on one stark fact that today's guest has come to really champion in the space. And it's that many of us think that we have a motivation problem when it comes to BizDev. But the reality is it's really not a motivation problem. It's a positioning problem. And so today's guest, Jen Allen-Knuth, founder at DemandGen. And before that, she was also the enterprise sales leader at one of the leading sales methodology organizations, Challenger, before becoming chief evangelist. We'll find out a little bit more about that one later on. So, all right, long introduction. Jen, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that introduction. My head is enormous now. I really appreciate it.
That's what you're supposed to do.
A little bit.
Exactly. That's what you're supposed to do to start the podcast. Be like, all right, let's get her talking. She's going to, be all excited to share all of the wisdom that's in this giant head. We're just going to shrink it down by letting you just, spell it out some.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, yeah. So before we get into just all the tactical knowledge fun, give us a little bit of a background, because as you and I were talking about before, I'm pulling over all these people who do phenomenal jobs at BizDev in the B2B SaaS space. So a lot of recruiters that listening may or may not be familiar with some of the speakers. So I guess if you just want to start like your background, what you did at Challenger, some of the things that you started to come across while you were there, and how your career has panned out from then.
Yeah. So like a lot of people who end up in sales, did not intend to go into it. I left college. I had a college roommate that worked at this company, corporate executive board, which went on to be acquired by Gartner. But it was basically, we were selling annual research subscriptions to best practice research, which sounds sexy, very sexy.
Very.
And so I ended up in a sales role there. I was lucky to work for like an incredible sales leader, loved it, and just kind of got hooked on sales because I saw it in a very different way than how it's often portrayed in TV and movies. So I spent about 8 years as an account manager that was working expansion accounts. And then I moved into new logo hunting. And then I moved into the challenger sale side of the business where I was selling into large enterprise clients, trying to get them to reconsider the sales training and sales methodologies that they were using today. I ultimately became the chief evangelist and created that job because one of the things I realized is we spend in sales a lot of time talking about ourselves and how great our stuff is and how awesome our solutions are. Marketing spends a lot of time, building up a brand and trying to drive leads for our sales team. But there wasn't really a ton of activity in the middle where it was educating the market on why should I even think differently about what we're doing today. And so that's what really kind of hooked me into this idea of how do you generate demand, which is why my nickname and company name kind of came about. And then I started my own company last October, and here I am today.
Okay. I love it. And so for those not familiar with the Challenger framework, give us like the 30-second rundown on it.
Yes. So the hardest thing about selling, I don't care what industry you're in, is that there's a million opinions about how to sell, right? So you can go on LinkedIn and one post tells you never do this, always do this. The next post tells you never do that, always do this. And so one of the things that Challenger did back in '09, when a lot of us were selling and weren't selling a lot because of the economy, is they went out and they did this massive study of sellers across all different categories, all different regions of the world, all different types of products that they were selling. At the time, I think, well, now it's up to about 30,000 sellers. But what they were simply looking for was, what are the skills and behaviors that tend to correlate with high performers? Because when you have a major economic event like happened in '08, '09, it sort of throws everything out the window of what used to work. And so the TLDR of it is that when they started looking at the skills and behaviors, there were 5 clusters of those. They just named them. And then they correlated that to say how many of each of those 5 categories, how many people in those categories are in the top performing set. And what they found was one profile. I kind of describe it more as like a mindset, like the
Mm-hmm.
mindset I bring, the beliefs and assumptions I have around how I sell. 54% of the high performers fell into that challenger profile. So that kind of gave me a little bit more confidence in knowing, what should I do? How should I show up in front of a customer? What is it the customer's looking for? And I credit a lot of what I've learned to that.
Yeah, I love it. And so do you think that started to feed into some of this philosophy around, like, one that we're all seeing? It's not about quantity anymore, it's about quality. But we're also seeing a lot of people that in the last year and a half have become very conservative with their spending, where they want to put budgets, and all that comes down to, it's like things are good enough, status quo. Like, we're losing more and more deals to this status quo. Like, we don't need to change or anything else. So one thing that I really like that you've gotten into is talking about how you sell the problem, not the solution. So get into, like, when you had this aha moment with that and how you're using that today and what you're recommending also at kickoffs and when you talk to different sales reps.
So I think a lot of companies will do like a company closed won, closed lost analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a big fan of doing that as an individual contributor, because I'm not doing the same sets of things everybody else is. So every quarter end, I would look back and I would say, all right, what are the patterns I'm seeing in the deals that I won and the deals that I lost? Well, there was a really clear pattern in the deals that I was losing, which was, I was getting a lot of customers to say, yes, I like Challenger. Yes, Challenger is better than the training like Bob in the back has been running for 100 years. Yes, we have a growth gap. Yes, 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 but call me back in 6 months and let's revisit it then, because it's just not the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear that enough and you realize that I think a lot of people portray prospects as being rude and abrasive and they don't care about sales. I actually think quite the opposite. I think prospects in general are really, really hesitant to share bad news with salespeople. So I took that and I said, okay, if I keep hearing this, what might be behind it? And then when I would look back at what I was saying and doing in those calls, what I recognized I was doing is, I'd get a call with them. I'd get on the call. I'd ask them a couple questions so I could check the box on discovery. And then as soon as I heard any of the magic words, like we're not selling as much as we should be, or, we've got new hires and they're not doing well, I would just launch right into telling them, well, here's why what you're doing isn't working. And here's why this is better. And let me tell you about all the companies that have implemented this and all the great outcomes that they saw. And it's interesting, right? Because you see people leaning in and they're
Mm-hmm.
shaking their head and things like that. But what I was totally missing was, someone can agree that we have a better way of solving the problem and still say no to doing anything about it. Because what I was totally neglecting is, sales methodology does not keep anyone's lights on, right? Like, I personally believe in having a sales methodology, but there are plenty of companies who don't have them that do just fine. And I was neglecting that a lot of my buyers probably felt the same way. So when they did their risk analysis of what are our big risks against the goals we've set forward as a business, methodology is almost never making it to the top of that list. And so, long story short, what I realized is, before I could ever sell someone on a solution, I had to get them to think and believe differently about the problem, the root causes of the problem, and whether or not this was even the right thing to fix right now. And so it was like one of those moments where you're looking at why you lose and you're looking at all your lost deals. And I was just like, man, it's so clear. How did I miss it?
Mm-hmm. That's something I feel like recruiters listening will absolutely feel this, because no company wants to admit, like, we need help hiring for this position, I can post a job online, someone will come to it. I can post on LinkedIn, someone will come to it. We have an internal recruiter, they'll figure it out. But then a couple months go by and you're like, it's okay, it's part of the process. A couple quarters go by and you're just like, so I kind of need someone in this role sooner or later. What's going on? And you start to dig and you're like, okay, maybe we do need help. But again, that's something where, I think to your point of like, it's pretty low on the list until it finally becomes a burning enough problem, so to speak. So I guess, how did you navigate that part of it with those conversations where, as you say, you got them to recognize and think about it differently? Like, what did you do from the sales standpoint to start beating some of the status quo issues?
Yeah. So the very first thing I did is I said, I've got to hold myself accountable to shut the fuck up about what I sell. Like, I cannot talk about that until the prospect and I both look at the problem at the same magnitude, right? The same order of magnitude. So to be specific, if even, and this was no different if it's inbound or outbound. Like, I don't think just because someone's looking at a sales methodology, that means they're any more likely to buy a sales methodology. Honestly, probably the numbers would suggest they tend to like not be, because they just realize how much it sucks to buy one. So what I would do is, first and foremost, before I got on that call, I had a great sales leader who taught me I need to know 5 things before I ever get on a call. One is, what does this company sell? How does this company sell it? Who do they sell it to? How do they make money? And then based on those 4 things, what might be hard for them relative to the problem that I solve? And at the time I was like, that seems like an awful lot of work, right? Like, just get on the call and ask them. But what it totally changed was, I was coming to the call, and by no means did it make me an expert in their business, but I was coming to the call with a point of view where I was saying, okay, gosh, if you sell a piece of machinery and you sell that direct and through distributors, and then now you're asking your sales force, who, what I can gather just by looking at, the average tenure of your sales team is probably like, 20, 30 year tenured people. Now you're introducing an AI offering, which is totally different than a physical product. I bet that's pretty hard to get people to buy into even selling it, and then to change that conversation and deliver an effective sales conversation when they're so used to something they can show and tell. And now you've got this like intangible service. I wonder if that's hard. So what my manager taught me to do is to come in with that point of view, but deliver it in a way that wasn't assumptive. So like, I don't show up and say, just because I did some homework on your business and I developed this idea, like, you must be struggling with this. I would come and I would frame it saying, like, I don't work within your 4 walls, but if I look at this plus this, it equals this. And I can't help but think maybe this other thing over here is much harder than it was before. And then what happens is I saw a total different like level of engagement with my prospects, because I think we've all been on those calls where we're trying to pull stuff out in discovery and it's like pulling teeth. In these calls, I was getting people correcting me. Well, actually, what it is this. And all that enabled me to do is have a really in-depth discussion about the problem, so that I didn't jump right into talking about our solution. So that's one thing that really helped me, was just what I was doing before the call and how I was opening the call. I wasn't saying like, hey, I'm excited we're here today. Let me tell you all about how we can help you. Because
Mm-hmm.
they don't even know if they have a problem we're solving.
No. And I love that you call that. And that's been a trend that's come up a few times now in this series, is using the discovery call properly before you even get into trying to solution anything. Like, let them talk. People want to tell you about their problems. I guarantee you they will gladly go off. But if you jump in right off the bat with, again, we are the best product of XYZ, or let me tell you how to do it, they're going to clam up, and you might go down the completely wrong assumptive path of what they're struggling with when it might be something else. So yeah, as you said, just shut the fuck up, listen, let them talk. And then they will guide you to exactly how you can continue that conversation with them and find out if you're a good mutual fit. But sometimes we dig our own hole before we get the chance to.
Absolutely. And I think the second thing on this particular piece is, this is where the whole cost of inaction stuff comes up. I've got to have a way to help my prospect size what that problem is costing them. Like, if I am just completely dependent on my prospect being like, yeah, we've done all the math and we've sat in these whiteboard meetings and strategy sessions for 48 hours and we've come up, that just shit just does not happen, because they're busy running their businesses too. Like, everybody's busy. They'd love probably to be doing those things. But I was able to then come in and say, for example, like what I do now, I'm trying to sell to companies who lose to status quo. And so I'm never going to sell to someone who doesn't believe they have a status quo problem. So I don't need to know their inputs, but I have to hold up a mirror and say, if I look at your business, I can see where this product over here or this solution over here could fall at risk to status quo, but I have no idea if y'all are on top of it or not. So here's what I would recommend we do. I want you to go in your Salesforce or your HubSpot or whatever you're using. I want you to pull your pipeline forecast data, and I want you to filter it by have had a conversation with a sales rep in the last 30 days. And then I want you to add up, or excuse me, have not had, that's a pretty big point. Have not had a conversation with a sales rep in the last 30 days. And then I want you to add up all the forecasted pipeline value of that. And then what that allows me to do is I can't tell them what those numbers are. I can just give them the formula, but it's a pretty simple formula to go and get answers to. Then I can come back and say, all right, what was the number? And now it's like, well, gosh, we've got, I don't know, X million of dollars in forecasted opportunities that haven't even talked to their sales rep in the last 30 days. Like maybe these are at risk for status quo. And all of a sudden it's like, they're the ones who got the data. I just gave them the formula, but it was allowing them to really then say, okay, we've got a $10 million problem. You're asking me for a $1 million solution. That's a hell of a lot better than $0 problem, $1 million solution. So it's really about just changing, like, what's the more expensive option? We have to make the problem bigger, but only if it truly is. We can't just manufacture stuff to make it seem bigger. And that's how I disqualify.
Oh my God, I love that, especially how you frame it, cost of inaction, because so many right now would look at ROI calculator and like, here's how much more you can make, but you take the flip side of it where it's just like, what happens if you don't do it? And I used to love doing this in my marketing agency days at Refine Labs. I'd be like, what happens if you continue on the path today? Like you're going to continue, like you're not going to get the results that you want. You're going to probably start to see negative returns if you keep doing the same best practices that everyone else is doing. So yeah, cost of inaction is absolutely brilliant. And I think within the hiring space, especially, what's the cost of inaction? What's the cost of not putting someone in this role for 6 months, 12 months? I mean, that's pretty easy to calculate out, right? So, I mean, I can't think of any time a recruiter has ever approached me, our company, like anything in a prior role where they were leading with something like that to put a little bit of a spur into it in the hiring manager versus, hey, I help to hire sales reps in the B2B SaaS space. Let me help you out. Like it's a no-brainer, right?
It's so true. And I think you hit on something really important, which is just allows you to be different. Like so much of sales, and I don't care what you're selling, is just how do I not sound like every other freaking sales rep that's trying to earn their attention. And one of the beautiful things about this job I'm in now, so I run a lot of workshops for sales teams to teach them how to open up opportunities. And in pre-work, I have them send a cold email to me that I review so I can sort of understand, like, what does this person think and believe they need to do to catch an executive's attention? So for me now, it's like clear as day, right? Most sales reps go out there and they're like, my name is Jen, and here's why I'm awesome, and here's why my company's awesome, and here's all the great stats and the big awards and all this stuff. And do you want to meet with me now? Have I impressed you enough? I used to write those too. But it's like that just becomes white noise. So it doesn't actually matter what you're selling because it's what that buyer is seeing. Like I might be a CEO, I'm getting sold a ton of different things, technology, professional services, recruiting, well, all these things. But I don't like distinguish between those categories. I'm just looking for those clues that tell me this is someone who wants to sell me something. So yes, it's a great way not only to get your prospect to understand the magnitude of the problem, it's also a great way just to have a fundamentally different conversation that people remember.
And I think that's something that you've posted about frequently. It's just like we're leading with the wrong message. And it's exactly what you just said in that email there, where if you're at a big company, you have marketing that gives you messaging. Here's what you need to say. Here's our pitch decks. Here's the email templates. Go use this. Go to market. Send 1 million emails a day. Have fun. We're going to, have predictable revenue model this all the way to the grave. But then you're on the front lines actually talking to the individuals, like you said, where you've learned to step back and not quite get into that pitch deck so early. And one of the things that I like that you call out is just like people nod and agree and be like, yep, you're right. This product is better. Your service is better, blah, blah, blah. But like, this isn't a priority to us. So how are you helping, I guess, what's the guiding light to helping an organization come to that realization for themselves that we need to change this messaging that we're leading with and not just do it for our own pitch decks, but like, how do you do that across an entire organization of individuals that may have been doing this for a couple of years or a couple of decades if they're, running their own 1, 2, 3 person recruiting agency?
So I love the way that you asked this question because you did not say, how do I convince them they need to change? You said, how do I help them come to the realization they need to change? And as minor as that is in the language, it is so major in what it means for what we say and do. So to be very specific, right? One of the things that I did learn from Challenger that has really helped me a lot was this idea that most people think salespeople have to convince you that what you're doing isn't good enough and there's a better way. And if I show you how better it is, you'll buy it. What I learned is if you think about any behavior we have as human beings is dictated by a set of beliefs and assumptions that we hold. So like, let's say I was a runner. I'm not, but let's say I was a runner and I really preferred this brand of shoes. If I just met you and you're like, oh, they're not the best shoes, these are the best shoes, immediately I'm going to get defensive because for you to be right, I have to be wrong. That is like an order of magnitude so much higher when you're in a sales versus a prospect situation. And so what I actually need to do, first thing I need to do is I need to look at what are the other alternatives for solving the problem to us. There is never a case where there's only one way to solve a problem. Like if I'm recruiting, it's like maybe I don't work with anybody. Maybe I just do it in-house and I've got Barry over here and he does it not very well, but he's the devil I know. So I stick with it, right? Like we as marketers, salespeople, owners, whoever, have to list what are all the alternatives to solving the problem with us. And then for each one of those alternatives, we have to look at why might that prospect really prefer it? Like take our sales and marketing hats off and be like, what's the compelling reason to stick with it? Well, I really know Barry. Barry's been with us for 40 years. Like I know Barry will get the job done. You're a new person to me. If I put this out on you, like I don't know how that's going to go because we cannot defeat status quo unless we understand it. So we have to, number two, just really understand why might someone prefer it. And then once we have that, now that tells us what new information do I have to go out and find that gives them reason to reconsider those beliefs and assumptions. And that is the trick, right? Like you can't do it just by starting there. You have to go through that logic flow because if I can introduce information that causes a prospect to reconsider that underlying belief and assumption, now I have a chance at getting them to reconsider their behavior. But the mistake I made, the mistake I see a lot of people make when they're trying to sell something is I just attack the behavior and I'm trying to convince someone to change the behavior. So that's really how I think about it. That's how I teach it is like, we cannot defeat the status quo if we can't empathize with it, we can't understand it, and we can't introduce new information that gets them to reconsider it. And the last thing I'll say is like, to put the pin on what you said in that question, we don't convince anybody to do anything. Like prospects convince themselves to change. And I think we really have to release that idea that like to be a great recruiter, to be a great salesperson, like I'm going to convince, no, they make a decision based on the information we have. Our job is to give them information that obviously works towards our favor.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I can't wait to just clip that part right there alone. It's brilliant. I've already got it. But yeah, you can't convince people, and it's similar. Like you don't want to put people on the defensive of, well, if you're right, that means I'm wrong. I mean, think about anytime you get chastised for something, like you've already tuned them out, you've written them off. Like good luck. So guiding, helping people come to these realizations, helping them see it for themselves. And that's what software services should do at the end of the day. You're not the hero of the story. It's them. It's their company. It's their business. You need to be the guide, the partner along the way that helps them get there. But if you try to shine that light on yourself instead of them, you're not going to be there long. I can promise you that.
So like now I have like this eye where I look for this everywhere. I'm not big on Twitter by any means. I just mostly go on there to like screw around. But I'll give you a perfect example. I saw this thread the other day. I posted about this. And it was a guy that said like something to the effect of the age-old wisdom of drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day will keep you hydrated is fundamentally flawed. And here's why. And then he did a thread on it, right? And I was like, okay, status quo is drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water every day. Like That's what I believe. I'm skeptical. Let me lean in. And then throughout the series of the thread, he introduced all this information I had never known, which then by the end of the thread, this was so slick, then he introduced this like hydration solution. Now, if he had just started with that and said, drinking water isn't enough, buy this, I would have been like, this is an ad, keep going. But because he educated with me, because he educated me, not educated with me, he educated me and he introduced insight, he hooked me. And that's the same whether it's marketing, sales, whatever. Like we as people love to learn stuff that makes us look smart, look funny. And I thought they did a really good job of it. So it's like once you learn it, then you're looking for it in the wild everywhere.
Yeah, I love it. Telling the story and doing it through education, like
Yeah.
those two, winning combination versus water sucks, do this instead. I mean, unless you're Liquid Death or like, I don't think that message is going to go too well, but they've probably got some awesome video that's going to accompany it, which will convince me water sucks. I'm going to drink out of a can instead.
Agreed.
So, okay, I like this. So let's keep pulling on some of that status quo stuff. And you were talking earlier about the win-loss analysis that you run for yourself, because I think a lot of how you start to lead into those questions and the conversation comes from experience. What did I do well? What did I not do so well? What do I need to tweak next time? And one of the things that you say is one of your posts you shared about this is you approach this like a detective trying to solve a case, and you really get into just like the who, what, where, when, why, how aspect of it. So as it relates to like status quo or competitor or any other like loss reason, what are some of the different questions that as you're going through this data set, you're thinking about, okay, what do I need to tweak as part of my talk track with them, the discovery and everything that follows?
Yeah. So I think it's an exercise that requires we drop our ego first and foremost, because if we don't want to hear what we're doing wrong, we're never going to find the right answers. So I look at it as like, assume I'm getting everything wrong and be pleasantly surprised if there's things I'm getting right. So a few things I'm looking for are one, who got involved in the deal? When did they get involved? And how were they introduced? That was one other big area that opened up a ton of stuff I was getting wrong. So like maybe I'd have a champion that inbounded, they'd get really hyped about our solution. I'd get hyped about it. And then because they were senior, I'd be like, all right, they can convince other people in their business. Let me drop my like standard collateral because that's easier for me. Here's a one pager, send them on their way. And then I would look at for those type of deals, what would happen. And in almost all of them, those would be like no decision, ghosted, whatever, because I was making the hill to climb way too high. I was creating like a high effort experience. So I pay very close attention to who gets involved, when do they get involved, how do they get involved, because that tells me, am I doing a good job arming my champion or am I dropping the ball there? So that's one. Two, I look at the source of the deal. So one of the toughest things I think about sales and marketing is like there's so many misleading things. So I was talking to someone the other day about cold email and they were like, well, cold calling is a much better channel for us. And I am not in the camp of like anything is dead. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I think we should use every channel available to us that makes sense for our buyer. But I was looking at, I was like, why do you think that? And they were like, well, look at the data. Look how many more calls we're booking off of cold calls. And I was like, okay, but let's look at what happens in the deal cycle to origination, cold call, origination, cold email. And what was really interesting is they were actually converting more cold email originated deals than they were cold calls. So while they had more cold call originated meetings, their conversion rate was way lower. So I'm like, that's what I'm kind of looking for in my deals too. I'm like, where did this deal start? Do I suck at like referral deals? Do I suck at like inbound deals? What were they inbounding off of? Was it a white paper or was it a true hand raiser? So there are so many like levels deep you can get into it. And part of it is just starting the exercise and just saying, let me look at who it is, the type of company it is, where they were introduced. Like those are the fundamentals. And then what I find is every time I do it, I just keep learning more and more because it causes me to look in different doors.
I like that. And you're talking my love language now, data analysis to start to figure out like what you should be doing in making these decisions. But the other thing I like, and what I always tell our team is like so much of the data though, use it directionally, not literally. We're going to win 37% more deals if we do XYZ, if we do email versus that. So just like, no, understand, like you said, hey, we don't get as many opportunities created from email, but we get more one deals from them. And that's just a result of the funnel, how it comes across. And then you can work backwards. Maybe when people get on a call, they feel bad. Like they want to give the BDR some love. They want to take the call. Sure, we'll take it, whatever, but it doesn't move on from there. So you can reallocate those resources to how do we better train the BDRs to send better emails, or what can we do to, help figure out why aren't these calls like turning into anything. You can, I don't know, come up with some way of just saying like, hey, by the way, like no pressure. If you don't want to take this call, if you feel bad for me, like don't take this call just because I'm on the phone asking you politely. Like if this is not something that like you're going to get into in the next quarter or two, let me know. I'll set a reminder for myself. I promise I'll follow up. But like if it's not now, just let me know.
Yes. Now you're speaking my love language. Okay.
Win-win. We'll take it. Okay. So I like those questions that you asked there. And then, all right, we've started to go down call and email. And I'm fully with you. Like cold calling's not dead. Email's not dead. LinkedIn DMs should be dead, but they're not dead. I'm just kidding. On that one, partially not. But a lot of this comes back to just like, it's so easy to like insert personalization token, like drop in a copy and paste script, something else. And I think this is something that's hurting so many business development opportunities. It's just this like, it kind of goes back to the predictable revenue model of like, I do 10 right now. What if I do 100? People think it's this linear growth path. It's almost like, I can almost tell you like, it's going to do this and that's going to go underneath what it was before. So you have a strong point of view on what we call like at scale versus doing what's right. So tell me a little bit more about just like your take on the volume-based era, where you're seeing things headed and what you're doing about it.
So I think there's so many examples in sales and marketing where we have just opted to hit the easy button because we want to prioritize what's easy for us. And at a human level, I can understand it because sales, marketing, they're hard. Like there's so much more rejection than positive affirmation. Like I get the temptation to hit the easy button. But I think there has been this philosophy ever since the predictable revenue model came out that like scale works because the numbers are so big, you'll eventually hit, your target. But I think as we have completely beaten to death email as a channel, like you said, LinkedIn as a channel and DMs, cold calling as a channel, somewhere along the way, that logic flaw just became really big. And so I think like if you look at, there's a great book written by Dr. Howard Dover, and I like barely ever read books, so I don't want to make myself out to sound like some academic, but
Dr.
he wrote this
Dover.
book. Let me butcher it now. He wrote this book a couple years ago called The Sales Innovation Paradox. And what it was looking at is like, why is it if we've spent the last 10 years building out all this awesome technology to help you scale and all these roles, like 10 timing the number of SDRs and BDRs that exist, why is it we're all still sitting here with the same damn pipeline generation challenge? Like, we're not seeing 10 times more pipeline. We're not seeing 10 times more deals, but yet we've just spent all this money and hired all these people to get the same average results. And so I really liked it because I think it paints the picture really well, which is there is a point maybe in time where we're going for volume works. But if we think about us as human beings, none of us like to be treated like a number. Like there's a language that's often used in emails and cold calls that I cannot stand, which is, other crows like you or other VPs of sales like you. And it's like, what the fuck does like you mean? Like, what are you basing like you off of? And that's, I think, where you end up having to go when you do these really large, cadences or sequences just to hit a number is you can't be specific. So I really believe the best way to get after it is to figure out what works for one account, one person first. And then once that works, then step back and say, what are the other like relatable problems other people might find? So I was going back and forth with a guy yesterday and he's like, I don't know how to do this at scale. I'm like, first of all, stop trying to do it at scale. Just try to do it well first. We wrote a great email and it was for a service that helped companies stop losing like shipment quality when they're going from point A to point B. So like they have, let's say you sell chocolate bars and you're delivering them in the middle of August and they keep showing up all melty and funky. Like that's a huge customer experience problem. So then look back and say, what other companies in my territory ship a product that might melt? Now I can reuse that message so I can get quote unquote scale, but I still have to take that step to say, why is this important to the business? I think at times we spend so much time trying to make scale work. It would actually just be easier to sit down and look at it on a one-to-one basis and be like, let's actually just do the right work instead of sending these like massively generic messages. So clearly you
Hmm.
got me on a soapbox because this is like
Yeah.
my pet peeve.
No, it's a good one. And it stems back to it's just like be relevant first and then find the parallels to it, but not everything is going to be parallel to it. You'll have to find those individual points to talk about. But again, put yourself in the shoes. Would you read this? Would you reply to it? Would you laugh at it? Would you post it in your company Slack and be like, look at how bad this outbound is? Like BDRs do not do this by any means. So like those happen, and oftentimes it comes just as a result of like, I just need to get emails out today, man. Like, let me just do this. But it's a waste of time at the end of the day for everyone involved. And it's not worth it.
It's not. It also just doesn't feel good. Like if I'm going to blast 1,000 emails back or out and I get 5 responses, that sounds awful to me. Like that sounds so awful. Like I really view sales, and I don't think it's often viewed this way. And again, it doesn't matter what you sell. I view sales as more of a game of outthinking your competition than outworking your competition. And I hate this notion that like sales is all about like hustle bro and, hustle culture. Yeah, like hard work is just a table stake. Like I don't think it sets you apart from anybody else. If you make more dials and you send more emails, like cool for you, bro. But like you're not getting paid on that. You get paid when you have better outcomes. And so I think today we really win when we outthink a lazy competitor who is doing the show up like, hey, other VPs like you think this. Do you think that? Versus like, I noticed this about your company, which got me thinking this might be interesting. And do you open to hearing how another company got after that? Those are two totally different approaches. One, it's very clear as day. You put no thought into my business. The other, it's like, okay, this person did put some thought into my business. So I choose that all day long.
Yeah. And so we recently switched. We have recruiters do not care about this. A dual motion go to market. I think, what the heck does that mean? you know this. But basically, we let people come into us. They can either talk to sales or they can try a product for free. And so what we did was we just completely overhauled those who come in to try a product for free. We said, instead of just sending a generic email like, hey, thanks for signing up, let us know if you have questions, we're doing every day an email goes out to them, not just like, thanks for signing up, but it's something that's really helpful to them. And there's there's a CTA at the bottom if they want it, but I realized there's this, you can talk to someone in an email or you can like help and educate. And we used to do, go through all of your email inbox, almost all of it's talk to. And then you wonder why your open rate is 5 to 10%. My mind was blown when I saw just our open rate, let alone the reply rate on these. We're in the 35 to 45% range. And it's for that exact reason. Like, it's value, it's help, right? And so that's where I was just like, guys, we've lost our way. But again, it's relevant to exactly, we know what they sign up for. It's a very specific channel. It's a very specific use case. So we could tailor it to that. If we tried to do it to everyone, anyone who's a lead, anyone who could be like, that's where it gets completely bogged down. People are at different places. People need help with different things. So yeah, I like that you were having us go down this path with this.
I love hearing that, right? Because I think one of the things we undervalue, particularly in this space that we're talking about, is the lived experience of the people who are reaching out to prospects. And what I mean by that is like, this also goes back to what I learned from Challenger. In the Challenger study, they looked at like, what is the impact of your product and brand, your price, your product, your brand, and your price, and the sales experience. And what it showed was 53% of what makes a company buy from you, buy more from you, and buy more over time and advocate for you as a supplier has to do with how much you can teach them about themselves and the sales experience. So like taking a look at an isolated situation, saying, okay, they inbounded, they're starting a free trial. Why might they have started that? And then offering not just, let me tell you about our stuff, but like, hey, you remind me of another client that was also up against this. They were kind of stuck between, do I go option A, option B? You open to hear what kind of helped them decide. That's not selling our product. That is helping someone get answers and perspective that they may not be able to get on their own. And I know I, as a salesperson, totally devalued that insight. But it's actually why people go to Slack to learn. They go to conferences to learn. They listen to shows like this to learn because they're like, what's everybody else doing? And we have all these conversations, yet we sit in our hands about it. And we don't share that because we're too busy talking about our stuff. So I just got to say, I love hearing that because I think that is what customers want and prospects want.
Yeah. So stay tuned on more data for that. Hopefully we'll get a ton more people signing up too. But yeah. So aside from that, just like as we wrap, any other parting wisdom just about BizDev, anything that are top of mind for you and I think this is a space that's really hungry for, like you said, they're starting to realize like we need to be different. There's so many recruiters like me. How do I differentiate? How do I stand out? Like any other last minute tips, tricks, recommendations?
Yeah. So the last thing I would say that we haven't covered is call out the elephant in the room. Like, I've never sold in this space. I'm not going to pretend like I know it, but I would be willing to bet that status quo is a big competitor. And so if you know the reason that people are typically reluctant to buy from you is because they are reluctant to outsource this, acknowledge it, right? When like hiding the ball doesn't make anybody less likely to think of it as an objection. If you lead with something like, hey, this company over here was really on the fence because they had been doing this in-house for decades. And the thought of all the what ifs that might happen if they change really stuck them until they saw this. And you open to seeing what that was, right? I think what you'll find is there's a large camp of people who have a perception that the change that's required to act on your offer is really scary. And so if they can here's how another company thought through it, and we don't try to sell them, we just give them an honest assessment. I think that can help someone start thinking about my assumptions, my beliefs around what it would mean to start working with you. And that's exactly the motion we want to get them. So long way of saying, like, call out the elephant in the room. If you think a company is resistant to change for a specific reason, lead with that and then give them a window into how another company ultimately overcame it.
And it shows the space. You've done your homework. You can relate to them, but also like it just gives off this air of you're more just a human, a down-to-earth person than the sales rep that's just trying to hit this number and be like, hey, like, look, I've noticed this is the trend. Like, fully get it. If you want to chat about it, let's do it. But this is what I'm seeing, and opening it up from there. So yeah, I think it scares a lot of people off because they're like, why would I bring up my biggest loss reason? Why am I going to even start there? It's like, you'd be surprised. So I think that's a good one for people to try. I don't think people expected that one from you as the last tip, but I'll be excited to hear if people start running with that one. So good. Jen, truly appreciate you joining for this. I'm already knowing tons of recruiters are going to be reaching out. Hopefully they blow up your LinkedIn DMs for good reasons, not to try and get you to like hire more people or to go place you somewhere, but just that this was helpful, that they learned a thing or two from it. So yeah, all in all, truly appreciate you coming on and sharing this wisdom with us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Good. All right. Well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode, but you're not sure where to go next, we do have a link to a similar one in the show notes, and you can find those in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform. Full video episodes are available on YouTube. If you have questions, send it to us at podcast@loxo.co. Send it to us via email, send it to us via LinkedIn DM, hit Jen up. She'll be happy to answer any questions. And if you really enjoyed this episode, make sure that you leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It takes 3 seconds, but it will help other recruiters like you to find us. So, all right, everyone, that's the show. That was a phenomenal interview with Jen Allen-Knuth. Until next time, bye, y'all.